I'm going to share my screen. I think it's easier to do it in a workshop-like fashion than anything else. If anyone has issues with that, feel free to say it. I don't know. We'll share the recording so you can watch it. Some people watch it on their phone, so it's not very useful. Can everyone see my terminal?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So Ansible in general is a config management tool. The original reason was if I have an infrastructure, it would be nice to have a tool that can maintain a specified configuration on all the servers of that infrastructure. So one of the outcome of that is that Ansible is trying to be idempotent in all cases, which means I describe how I want the infrastructure to look like, how I want the server to look like, and Ansible is going to try to apply that in a fashion that if it's already there, it's not doing anything. If it's not, then it changes the config to match what I described. So that's a little bit different than the programming we do with Bash. So I'm not telling what steps to do. I'm telling you what's the end result I would like to look at. Ansible is using SSH. So if you have SSH enabled on your servers, then usually you're ready to use Ansible. It's written in Python. So usually you need some kind of Python base installed on all the machines, which is the case on our own servers. And most of the Linux servers you build in the cloud, they usually have this. The one exception I found was DigitalOcean's CentOS image, which doesn't seem to have the Python base installed, so you have to first install that, then you can start running Ansible. So let's dig into the first command, which is going to be the Ansible command. It's very much like the command line interface for Ansible. We're going to get into scripting, and that's using a different command. Usually what you want to do is you have to set up your SSH connectivity. In my case, this is set up through SSH agent, but you can always add your own private key and use that to connect to the servers. I think it's not worth thinking about passwords in this case because Ansible is also trying to do everything in parallel. So it's not going to go server by server and ask you for the password for that server. It's going to try to run all your commands all at once and on all machines. So you need to have some kind of SSH, what's it called? Public key authentication enabled. So in my case, it's SSH agent is running on my machine. The second thing you need to be aware of that Ansible doesn't actually know what kind of servers you have, and it's not like SSH where I type in the server name. So this is one server we have at Interchain. Let's use this. But the problem is it needs to have a list of servers. So it's more of a full infrastructure management tool. So it needs to have an inventory. So the inventory is actually quite easy to set up because you can just use a file. So in my case, I have an inventory. I think I called it myInv, which contains a list of servers. So now I can point out that in this list of servers, I only want to run whatever command I'm going to run on this server. And I'm going to show you that file in one sec. And the last thing is Ansible is using modules to do its bidding. So modules are a specific tool to do one specific config management. You can copy files, that's a module. You can start services or stop services or manage services, that's a module. And these modules are also written in Python. The point of them is that they can do things in an idempotent way. So if I want to copy a file, but the file already exists and it's the same as the file I want to copy, it's not going to copy it. It's not going to rewrite it. It has some really interesting implications. For example, if that file is written as a log file, then you didn't rewrite the inode number on the Linux server. Okay, let's do the first basic command. Modules can be invoked with the -m or -- module parameter. I'm going to do the module ping, which is usually very similar to the ping command in Linux, except in this case, it's doing it over SSH. So what I'm trying to do here is, let's authenticate, see if I ping the server, see if I can log on to the server, and then and log off. Right now, it couldn't find the server, so I'm going to have to look at this file. Okay, let's look at that file. Oh, okay, it's called my inventory. So So let's look at that file. So my inventory is a list of servers. This is my infrastructure. So let's run that command again with the right. There you go. Now it should ping that one server. So it logged onto the server. It was able to. It used the username and the passphrase, and it was able to run a ls command, or just a touch command, or something that it says that I was able to connect to SSH. That's all it did. If I want to do this on all my infrastructure, there is an all command that you can do. And now I'm going to ping all the 4 servers I have in my inventory. Right? So in our infra right now, we have 3 sets of servers that we call Tic, Tac, and Talk. These are developer servers that you can use to run Tendermint on. So it would be nice if I could just say I want to ping all the Tic servers instead of going, all the Tic servers one by one. So I wrote a different inventory file, myinv2, which is adding groups to the mix. So now I have all the 12 servers listed, and I grouped them into 3 different groups: Tic, Tac, and Talk. So now I can do, if I use this inventory file, I can do myinv2, and I just want to ping the Talk servers. And first issue, one of the servers seems to be new, and I haven't ever connected to it, so it needs to know the known hosts. It needs to fill in the known hosts for that server. Let's see if this works. Yeah, talk2 was new. So obviously, all the issues with SSH are still present because it's using SSH. So be aware that you need to know the known hosts. You have to have the passphrase set up, or you have to have a private key in your .ssh folder. One of those need to be set up in some shape or form. Okay, so these are groups. You can create groups, sorry. What was the name? myinv2. You can reuse the host names in groups. So I'm going to create I'm doing some testing, test1 group, and it's going to contain all the Tic nodes. And I also want to use one of the Talk nodes for some reason. So now I can just run all my commands against that test. Was it called test? Oh, sorry. Test1, yeah. So I can run test1. So now I'm going to ping all those 5 servers. So you can reuse the groups, and you can mix and match what you need to do. Okay? Before we move on to the actual commands, I want to show you that you can use the inventory dynamically also. So these are static files. You have to update when you add a new server. Kind of sucks in a cloud environment when your servers can come and go. So there are Python scripts which query AWS, in our case, for what kind of servers you have. These are standard scripts also that you get with Ansible. So I have and you have it for different cloud providers. So you can use this with DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean has their own scripts. AWS or Google Cloud has their own scripts. So AWS's script is called EC2Py. This script can output the list of servers you have on your AWS account, and use that output as the input of the inventory for Ansible. So I can do something like Ansible, my inventory is going to be inventory/EC2Py, and just ping everything that you find there. Now the only thing is I need to have Ansible AWS credentials to be able to do that. So you either create you do the export AWS access key ID export AWS secret access key, or in my case I have a profile set up already, which I call Bootstrap. So I'm just going to add that in front. And if I don't want to add this all the time, then I can just do export AWS profile equals Bootstrap. So now you can see that it's a bit slower because it's reaching out to AWS to get all the server. After it gets, I'll be able to ping all the servers that you see there, which is going to be almost the same set of servers we have, except there's RPC staging. I think that's the extra server that it should find. Wow, this is taking way longer than it usually does. So talk, tick, 0, yeah, all the servers that we already know about. There's RPC, and the rest is the same. So now the list of inventory came from AWS instead of my local file. For the case of, for these tests, we're going to keep with the local 5 just because it's quicker, and it already limits to the number of servers that, the limits to the servers that we actually want to manage, and not all the servers. But it's worth knowing that this can be made dynamic. All right.
Can we see the ec2.py? Like, what does that look like?
Oh, it's shipped with Ansible, so it's a Python script which is quite. Oh, we can run it if you want, if that's what you're looking for. It's going to output a JSON object. Oh, it's supposed to if I have credentials set up. It's going to output a JSON object, which is the servers, the groups, the tags you have. Oh, tags. I want to show you the tags.
So in general, the Ansible-I can either take a Python script, which will return a JSON object with the information, or it can take one of these inventory files, which is basically, it looks like it's like TOML or?
TOML, yeah, kind of like TOML.
Cool.
Similar, but not exactly TOML. One thing I want to show you before we move on is that Ansible has a very strong documentation on all of its details. So if you want to do something specific, like rename the server names, then docs.ansible.com is always your the best way. So I actually had to go through this once and read everything. You don't need to read everything, but there are a lot of interesting stuff that's worth looking at. For example, inventory. And it's searching for inventory. Ansible inventory. So, this is the command. Doesn't matter. Google is also quite good. So if you say Ansible inventory in Google, it will redirect you to one of these documenting pages. And then there you go. And the documentation tells you all the details what you can put into an inventory file. So you can even use a YAML version if you want. That's interesting. So yeah, it looks like so Ansible is written in Python, but it looks like it's using very similar methods as Viper and Go. So YAML is definitely there. TOML and JSON is also part of it. It might be very specific in some cases. Like you can see that you can add more servers with some kind of pattern matching. But I don't really. So for this basic set of things, we'll have a limited set of servers. So if you want to, you can add more stuff here and read through it, but I don't think we need it right now. You can add variables, for example, to each of the servers and define them differently. So if you have a full infrastructure where you know exactly all the parameters, half of them can go into this inventory and the rest is just the commands to actually execute on them. Okay. The one thing I want to show with this AC2 script, which is useful, is that it also collects the host names into different groups based on their tags, their AWS tags. So I tagged, I wonder which server I tagged, but I tagged, I think, the tag servers. So you can filter through all of the by all of these names. So I can say, give me everything in US East 1F, or I think, what was it? Yeah, let's try it. It was tag underscore testnet. Testnet is the name of the tag. Tag. I think it was tag. So every server that I tagged as testnet equals tag. So now I'm going to just ping those ones. All right, those are there. So this is coming from EC2 again. All right.
So this is like, this basically has the same effect as the tag heading, the tag heading in the inventory file.
Yes.
Now referring to tags in the AWS.
Yes. So for example, if you're using Terraform to create new servers for yourself, add tags. Tag them with something that you can use as groups. And then in Ansible, you can just refer to those tags and it will run on all the servers instead of just one. Okay. All right, let's look into this. So this is the inventory. We're going to go back to something much easier because we don't need AWS for this. We're going to just go with myint2. And instead of that, let's use the tech. So this should still run. Okay, one last thing I'm going to show you, which seems counterintuitive at this point, but in later cases it might make sense. There is also a limit, dash limit or -L, where you can say limit it even further with whatever you came back with. So now it only runs with that tag too. Okay, so that's if you can see, we're adding more and more input parameters. We're going to try to make that easier after yet another test. So what was the next one I wanted to do? So now we can ping all the servers we want. Let's do something more interesting. Let's do a file copy. Okay, so let's create a file, test file. Hello, that's our test file, and we want to copy this over. Usually what you do is SCP, whatever user, oh yes, before we do the file copy, we have to look into the users. So you can see that in this case, it was able to log in and I didn't specify a user. That's because in my SSH config, my default is to always use the CentOS user. Because all these servers are CentOS servers, and most of the cases I use the CentOS user. There is a -u that you can use to define which user you're going to use to SSH in. So it was still able to do that. That's perfect. If I change it to EC2 user, which we're using in our experiments, then obviously it couldn't because there's no EC2 user, right? So I didn't add this because in my SSH it's already defined. You can also define it in your Ansible configuration. I'm going to get there. The one thing I didn't do yet, which is what you usually need to do for every infrastructure work, is you need root access. So it would be nice if I could directly access, for example, etc files. And right now, as the CentOS user, I'm not an admin. So there is a --become, which is the newer version of sudo, or -b, which I can use. And you won't see the difference here because it will just still ping. But now I actually pinged as root. Okay? The wording is really just Ansible's way of telling that by default you use sudo, but there are other mechanisms to go to root. For example, su, which we don't really use, and the default is sudo, so it's all set up for us already. But because of that, they moved away from the sudo command to this become command because you want to become a different user. So now we can, let's copy this file over. The module we're going to use is copy. And then this copy module needs extra attributes to define what we're going to do. Again, this looks very convoluted because it's a long command line. It's going to be much easier as soon as we start scripting. Okay? So the commands are, so the attributes we're going to use is source, which is our test file, and destination, which is our home directory. Because it starts out from the home, I can just say, just put it there, put it in my home. And I'm only doing this on tag2. So I'm going to open another shell and go to tag2. And try to make it a bit bigger. Okay. So yeah, you see that now it's not green because we actually did something. So it returns you what happened. So far, before that, we didn't change anything on the server. In this case, we did. We actually added a file called test file. So it gives you all the details on what exactly happened. But the important point is that this is yellow. So that means that something changed. If I want to do this again, let's run the command again, because I mentioned that this is idempotent. It's supposed to come back as green because it didn't have to do anything. The configuration was already exactly as you defined it as it should be. Does that make sense? So Ansible is claiming that the file is there. So let's see. Oh, there is a test file. Yeah, test file says hello. So if I change the test file, and run the command again, it's going to say, oh, I did a SHA checksum and it's different, so I should copy that over again. And it did, right? So if I do a cat test file, it says goodbye now. And if I run again, obviously idempotent, so. All right, so as I mentioned, we want to do this as root, and I want to put this in the root directory instead of my, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just a quick question. This is only happening on the one TAC2 server.
Yes, do you want to do it on all servers?
If you did it on all of them, if you just get rid of the L, it would do it on all of them, yeah?
Let's do it, yeah. So now I'm going to do it on all the TAC servers, which is 4 servers.
Right.
So let's see what happens. What I'm expecting to happen is it's going to copy it over to the 3 servers, which happened here, here, and here. And if you scroll up, TAC2 was already set up, so it's not going to do anything about it. And there's a, oh, no summary here. There will be a summary later on that says, these are the number of changes I made, and these are the number of executions I did that can end up in changing things. So now I copied it over to all servers, and now I'm checking that it's all there on all servers. Now it's all green. Makes sense, right? Okay, so just for the sake of this test, I'm going to go back to this TAC2 server for now, but you understand that this can very easily be run on everywhere. Okay, so now I want to put this test file in the /root folder. So I'm not going to change the destination again, but I want to elevate the root. So as I mentioned, the -b command can do that for you, become root. So now you're supposed to put this file as root in your home folder, which is /root. And it didn't. So it's green. It means that it's already been put where it's supposed to. So the dest equals dot was actually not root's home directory, but the CentOS users. So owner is still CentOS. That's interesting. Okay, so then let's do /root directly. It's not advised to use relative paths in Ansible scripts. It's always advised to use absolute paths because these things can happen. So now I was able to put it in /root/test file because I was running it as root. Let's see if I don't run it as root. What happens there then? I'm not even supposed to have access to the /root folder. So hopefully Ansible will tell me that I couldn't get the file because I don't. So it doesn't even know if the file is there because I couldn't get to the root folder. So let's copy this file everywhere as root, not just on TAC2, but all the servers. So this should work now. So all the root folders on all the servers will contain this test file. Okay, any questions so far? And now it's owned by root, as you can see, and the destination is /root/test file. So I was able. This is something that is really hard to do with SSH because you have to copy it over first, and then you have to go to the server, sudo, and then copy it over as root. So I was able to do it in one step on multiple servers as root. And still secure because I didn't have to use a root password or anything. I just sudoed with the regular user. So far, this is good, right? Now,
is there some versioning on this configuration when you are deploying? It's just a curiosity, so I guess it's not relevant to us. But like versioning of this configuration, because it seems like that Ansible is treating this as a configurations. And so like, is there some kind of internal versioning so you can say, yeah, go back, roll back to the version 1 or version 2 or something like this?
Not really. What you can do is we're going to group these commands into roles, and you can have version 1 role, version 2 role, and whichever you apply is going to get applied. So rolling back to version 1 will be applied to version 1 role, whereas upgrading to version 2 is applied to version 2 role. But Ansible is not really doing source code management. It's doing more just config management. Just apply a specific configuration on the environment. And all the source code management and versioning needs to be happening on, usually in GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
So what we usually do is you have the scripts that you wrote is in a GitHub repo. You run Ansible to apply it. And if you want to roll back, then you revert your GitHub repo to an older version and apply that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, before we move on to scripting, I'm going to tell you one secret that it's worth doing, which is the config file. So there is a config file somewhere under etc Ansible if you want to set it up globally, but you can always have one locally as ansible.cfg. And I think I have a prepared one here as a.cfg. The important part of this, we'll go through all the settings as we get there, but inventory can be predefined, so you don't have to always add -i. This one says EC2Py, but I think that's the slower one, so we're going to just go with the myinf2 script that I have. And as you can see, you can define the remote user here as well. So this way, it's always going to try to use the CentOS user to connect. Private key file is important only if the private key is not your default .ssh/id_RSA. In my case, it's not. I'm using SSH agent, so I'm not going to use this. And then become equals yes is the -b command. So I'm always going to sudo to root with each Ansible command that I run. So if I move this A to Ansible.cfg, then when I run Ansible and it finds the Ansible config in the local folder, I should be, oops, wrong button. Should be able to get away from -i. Still need to define which servers I want to run this on, and I don't need the -m. So it's a little bit better. And this should still run as expected. And it did. Okay. So with the Ansible config, I was able to shorten my CLI a little bit, my command line. So the three things that we are always going to need to define is who are the servers we want to connect to, what is the command module that we're going to run, and what attributes that command module has. Okay, again, before we go to scripting, let's get acquainted with some other modules. So copy is cool. You can use the copy command recursively. You can add a directory as a source and the destination as a directory, and it will copy everything in there. You can also, so we have the ping, the copy. What do you want to do? Let's do service.
Could you define your own module, like for instance, sending transactions to running Tendermint nodes or something like this?
You can, but it requires a little Python scripting. So
okay.
Finding your own module is, actually, if you want to write a Tendermint module, that would be awesome. It's not hard. It's a very small Python script. And you can either publish it for the whole community or just use it locally on your machine if you put it into a modules directory under here.
Okay, cool.
So Ansible is going to take the local folder structure very seriously, and it's going to we're going to use it for a few things. So if you have anything under the modules directory, it's going to read that and try to apply it as a module. But you'll have to look up the documentation on how exactly you write a module. It's yet another class you have to create in Python and implement. Okay. So service module has a little bit different naming conventions. You need to have a specific service in mind. Let's stop the NTPD service. So name is definitely a property to remember, and state. Because as I said, you're not exactly giving it commands, you're giving it a resulted state you would like the whole thing to be in. You can define, I want this stopped. So what happens if it's already stopped? Nothing. If it's not stopped, then it's going to stop it. Now, before I do that, let me actually check if there's an NTP command there, NTP service there. Nope. Okay, so in that case, let's install that instead. Okay, so there is a yum module, and I want the NTPD package. Is it NTP or NTPD? NTP. Okay, so we're going to set up NTP. NTP package, and I want the state to be, I think it's installed or present. I can't remember. Let's try with present. No, let's try with install. So now I want to install the NTP package on all the servers because I already sudo to root. I shouldn't have any permission issues, and I figured out the right name for the package. So hopefully this works. Oh yeah, it does. So yellow always means it changed things, and if it's red, it tried to change things and it failed. So yellow means it successfully did it. You can see that the whole output is printed back. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's annoying, but it was able to install and start the NTP service on all the 4 servers. Okay, so now we have an NTP service, so let's use the service. The service module to actually stop it. So state equals stop. It says red because, funnily enough, although the package is named NTP, the daemon is named NTPD. So you need to know your stuff before you run Ansible, or you're going to run into these kind of stuff. There you go. And it's green, which means that although it installed the service, it didn't actually start it by installing the service. So you can see that all 4 servers have the NTP server now, NTPD service now, but it's not running. So state is already stopped. So let's start it then. Or better yet, I'm going to show you the restarted command. The restarted command, if the service is stopped, it's going to start it. If the service is running, it's going to restart it. So stop and start. But there is a started command also, which will, if the service is stopped, it's going to start it. If the service is running, it's going to do nothing. So you can see by the yellow that I started the service, and now by the green that actually it was already started, so I didn't do anything. Make sense?
Yeah. Where does one find like the list of available modules and then what the options are for each one?
Okay. Very good question. Documentation.
Okay.
So what I usually do is I use Google to say Ansible copy module. And then this is the same documentation. Eventually you can module index. This is it. This is what you're looking for. So this module index will give you all the modules there are, and it's already, oh wow. So they separated it into different types of modules. So usually commands modules, let's see. Oh, this is just when you want to run a specific command that is not available as a module, but say files modules, that's a good one. So we use the copy module. We're going to use the file module in a second when you want to manage some file that is already existent on the server. For example, change ownership of the file. We're going to use the line in file, which is a very easy set. If you want to change a specific line in the file. We are going to use the template module, which is same as the copy module, but you can make it into a template, very similar to the template package in Go. And as it copies over, it fills in all the variables. Or unarchive, which is just basically unzip. Going back to the copy module, so it's actually not bad. The documentation is not bad. You can always find all the details of the specific module. The ones we were using here is destination, source, and then the more interesting ones is owner. So if you want to, so if you copy everything as root, it's going to be owned by root. If you want the Tendermint user to own it, then you can define it in the same module. You don't need to use a second module to define who owns it. So ownership, group membership, and mode. Mode is supposed to be here too. Those are the 3 that I usually use with the copy command. For example, well, let's set up Tendermint on all these servers. So obviously I need to create a user. Most probably that's going to be the user module. So that's easy because I just changed my URL to the user module and it should take me there. Awesome. So there is a user module. I can set up a name. Usually there's always a name. And what else do I need? I don't want passwords. no roles or anything. Yeah, let's just try it like that. Oh, state. I'm going to show you the state. So state is usually present. That's the default. But if I want to remove a user, then I can set the state to absent. And again, if the user didn't exist, it's not going to exist after this either. So it's not failing just because the user didn't exist. Okay, so we have NTP set up. Let's set up a user with the attribute name equals Tendermint. Let's see what happens. What I expect to happen is that because Thane was using the text servers with Tendermint already, most probably the Tendermint user already exists. But that's not a problem. It's just going to say there was nothing to do. And that's the case. Okay. You can see that on this server, the shell for the user is bin bash, but on this one, it's sbin no login. No login and no login. So let's move all of them to no login. So now I know that this already exists, but I want to set the shell. I think it was shell, the property, or not. I'm gonna just, yeah, it was shell. So I can change the shell. So shell equals /sbin /no login. And now I made it uniform on all the servers. It should not create a user because it's already there, but it will change the shell of the existing user. Ta-da! It changed to sbin no login. All the other three were already fine. Okay. So what's the next step for the Tendermint user? We should have a service file, right? I think that's already existent, right?
Yeah, there'll already be one in the tax servers.
Yep, there is one. So, okay, I'm going to steal that for this example because I don't have that file. I'm just going to 0.staging.interchain.io. Well, actually, I think you know what I'm getting at. So now I can say copy that file over to the specific place. Source equals service destination equals UPC service. Now it's interesting to see. Obviously, it's going to tell us if something changed. Let's change this file. On track 2, we're going to change this file to limit memlock infinity. I'm going to remove that. So now this file is different on this server. Someone changed it. Okay. As I copy it over, it's going to overwrite with this file. We already know that it's going to tell us that it's a change, but I can also add diff to tell me what exactly changed. So let's see what happens there. So the first 3 servers didn't change at all, and the 4th one changed, and it added back the missing line that was missing on the server. Does that make any sense? So this is a diff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I like it. It's sometimes. Also, I'm not sure, so let's again do this again, but now limit as is going to be removed. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if anything changed, and if it did, if it's a good change, if I just blindly put this on. So there is a check extra command which will do a dry run. So it will run everything as it's supposed to, but it's not going to apply the changes. So nothing changed there. Yes, we know. And it will tell me that this is the change. It should be a changed state, but it didn't apply to the change. So now I can, if I apply the change, it's going to go through the same thing again. We've been at it for about 30 minutes now, and we didn't get to scripting yet. Do you guys want to continue this or start working on some core stuff?
What does scripting entail? What can you do with it? Like,
Sure. So obviously, if I add more comments one after the other, I can write bash script and say Ansible tag m copy service yum and add these scripts. But that's not the point. Ansible is much more powerful than that. There's another command called Ansible Playbook. which if you don't mistype, it's easy to type. Ansible Playbook is a command that takes a YAML file, which is a set of these commands, and executes them one after the other. So let's look at the first one I wrote. It's a YAML file which defines the host. Don't worry about this line so far, it's commented out. And then one task, which is the ping task. Now, okay, we ping it, but we can do the yum name equals, let's install something else. Well, or let's install NTP again. State equals, or you know what, even better. State equals absent. Let's remove NTP. But before we do, be nice. It's not necessary, but let's, oh, sorry, equal sign. Let's name equals NTPD and state equals stop. So you can see that I already wrote 3 commands in 3 lines, and I didn't use the whole CLI to put them together. And let's see what happens. So this is supposed to run, well, actually, let's make it the same way as it is everywhere else. So I'm going to run from all TAC servers. So all TAC servers will get pinged first, then the NTP server stop, and then we're going to just remove NTP. Normally, it's not necessary to stop the service when you want to remove it. It does it automatically. This is a use case, so I can show you that you can run multiple commands. So Ansible Playbook, it actually has similar input parameters. -I is still there, but we already set it in our config file. -b is still there. We already set it in the config file. And the only difference is because we defined the host inside the YAML file, I don't need to set a host here. I just need to give it the script itself, which is my first book. Let's see what happens. So one thing with the playbook is that it's going to do some gathering facts. I'll get back to what this is. It's an awesome feature, but let's get through what we did. So what we did first. So you can see that it's a bit more compressed. The output is a bit more compressed because now I'm running it, running a lot of things. It didn't give me the exact details of what I did. There is a verbose command, or you can use -v in the command line, and you can get all the details. So service was changed, so most probably it was able to stop it. Yum was changed, so it removed all the NTP packages from all the servers. And we have 4 servers at the end, which they had 2 steps that changed things. By default, if a server is unavailable, it's just going to continue with the rest of the servers. So it will try to get as many of the servers into the expected state as it can. You can actually change that, and I usually change that to stop as soon as one of the servers are not responding or cannot run the command, because in my usual use cases, it's better to keep the servers in the same state than have some of them valid, some of them invalid. But it's depending on your use case. So let me get to the gathering facts part. So gathering facts is actually going to look at the servers and try to get some of the details of the servers into Ansible variables. For example, how many CPUs you have, how many, what's your host name, what's your IP address, do you have multiple IP addresses and multiple interfaces, what kind of network interfaces you have. Some of the default information of the host is going to be gathered in this step. It's very useful when you have very complex playbooks to have these information up front, because you can say, run some, networking is the only example I have in mind right now, but run, really can't come up with anything useful now.
One of the ways of, one of the useful features over there is, say now you're deploying stuff to systems with different operating systems, then you could say when OS is CentOS, then do this, when OS is Debian, do
so
this.
The operating system is also in that gathering facts phase. It gets into one of the variables. Thank you, Thane. That's very useful. Usually we use the same operating system and we have very similar server setups, so that's not a problem, but we'll get to the whens. That's a good one. Okay, so first book, let's go back to our first book. If I set gather facts equals no, then well, it's a colon, not an equal sign, then it's not going to do that step. For simple scripts, you can set it so the run is actually quicker, because if you don't use any of the variables from there, you don't really need those facts. Okay. Now, this is YAML, and you still see equal signs. That's because it's in one line. But you can always put them in multiple lines and make them look nicer. Also, because now we're scripting, it would be nice if I actually knew why exactly I put this in here. And there's an extra property you can set for each of these tasks, which is called main. So I can actually do something like this. Stop NTP service. And then service. And same here, remove NTP package. When I run it like this, it's going to use these as the titles. So you can see, whoops, what did I do wrong? I think I didn't need to. Yeah, I always mix the, there we go. No, I did too much. Sorry. Oh, yeah, this space here. Not PI, sorry. So running it. Okay, so now you can see that I didn't really add names here, but here I added the name. So now it knows what it's exactly doing. So it's a more descriptive way of doing it. And it failed because there's no such service, because we removed the actual service from the system. So that's fine. Variables. I didn't actually get to this point, so I'm going to cheat and look at the documentation also. You can add variables here, and I actually had only 30 minutes of talk here. I want to get to variables and then roles. That would be nice. Okay. Let's say that I'm not really interested in stopping the NTP service, but a random service that I have an input variable for, and that input variable can have a default value, or I can add it in the command line. Oh, it's not variable, sorry, it's vars. So let's say that, I have a variable called service, now set it to NTPD, and then I can say, so here we're getting into something called the Jinja templating language. It's a Python templating language, similar to Golang's template package, but with a little bit different syntax. If you want to read up on Jinja, then there's a good documentation there too. I'm going to show you the site, but let's go with some of the basics, and then you can just use those. So I have a variable called service, and I can just fill it into my script. So now, instead of stopping NTPD, it's going to stop whatever is in here. So let's stop something else. Let's see, what kind of services do we have there? Do we have any kind of cron service? You know what? Let's keep with the NTP service, only we have to reinstall it first. I can use it in the descriptions too. So let's write another. Well, actually, this is not going to work, right? Why is this not going to work? Who can tell me? It's not Ansible related. It's not going to work because for some reason the NTP package is called NTP, while the service is called NTPD. So let's have a package variable also that is called NTP. And I'm going to install the package. Installing package. And then I can start and stop the service. Any questions so far? So you see that I introduced two variables and I started using them in my script. It's quite a good leap, isn't it, from the command line that we were using so far. And I messed up. Oh, yes. So here's the first annoyance of Ansible. If you start using variables, or if you start using, what's it called, replacement? Yeah, if you want to replace variables in a string, you always have to put them in quotes. And not just the replacement, but the whole line. So my go-to is, if I started using any kind of replacement, I'm using quotes.
Interpolation is what you're looking for.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you, interpolation. So if you start using interpolation, that's the full sentence is, then full sentence is, if you start using interpolation, start using quotes. Who said that?
I did.
Oh, thanks. How? Huh. Hi, Mircea.
Hello.
Okay, before we move forward, you can see that now. So it says NTP here. I didn't actually say NTP. I just added the variable. It says NTPD here. Perfect, and it was able to run through everything. Obviously, as we noticed before, just installing the package doesn't actually start the service. So the stop thing didn't really do anything, but I was successfully able to remove the package afterwards. Before we move forward and get into roles. I want to ask, do you have any specific tasks in mind that you want to do with Ansible? And let's try to use a little bit more modules to get ourselves familiar with what Ansible can do. So we can copy files. We can, let's manage a file. So I'm going to just do it on the command line. On all the top servers, we have a file called root test file, right? We copied that over. Let's use the files for file module. It has an input called path. And let's change the mode of that file to executable. Obviously now everyone knows how to put this into a script, right? File module and then attributes. So now it's all executable. Let's do something more interesting. Let's override our variables. So let's go back to the first book. And I'm not going to define the variables here. I need to define it in the command line. So it's --var package equals any other package that you guys want to install. Something something that doesn't really kill the server, but it's still okay if we have it. Nginx. No, Nginx isn't. Oh no, Nginx should be there. Let's see if we can install it. And then --var service equals. Well, fortunately, it's called Nginx in this case. So let's see what happens here. No, okay. It's vars maybe or something like that. Vault, nope. Extra -e, okay, or extra vars. So -e, I always mix this up with the Terraform input variables, which is --var. So now, oh, look at that. Our first book script is actually reusable now because of the input variables. I can do the same thing with different variables. It's installing the Nginx package instead of NTP. That's good. No?
Awesome.
Okay, so we installed Nginx, and usually it doesn't start after installing the service, so there's nothing to do there. And we're removing, maybe I should have commented that out to keep Nginx on. Okay, it's getting more interesting now, right? I hope, because
Cool.
cool. Okay, what else do we want to do? Let's use the test file. Let's assume we still have the same variables, and I want to write a message that says, hey, I installed package and stopped this service. So this is going to be a text file. I want to copy it over in my script, but you know, obviously replace these things. So there is a module called template that can do that for us. So when I'm done with this, ooh, we're going to get into notify also. Add message to server. I'm going to use the template module. The template module is very similar to the copy module, as I mentioned. So it has a source, which is test file in our case. It has a destination, which is going to be root/test file. We're going to overwrite whatever is there. And that's it. And I'm going to comment out this one so we don't remove Nginx anymore. I mean, it's nice that we can, but we don't actually need to. And instead of stopping it, let's make it started. Okay? Okay, let's see what this does. I would, there, first book YAML. Oh, I need the input parameters because I commented them out in the playbook. So we're going to use those input parameters. We're going to disable pinging also because it's just wasting our time. We don't need that. So it's reinstalling Nginx, starting the service. Hopefully it succeeds. Perfect. Adding message to server. Done. So let's go to that server and see what happened there. Yeah, I don't have that. Yeah. Hey, I installed Nginx package and stopped this service, Nginx. Okay, seems like it worked. So now when you have a Tendermint config file that you want to manage on your local machine and send it to all the machines with minor changes, then you can do it as a template. Good?
Awesome.
Do you guys want to continue?
Do you think we could go, I mean, can we see this in use with like a real
Yes.
Tendermint network?
Yes. So Interchain. I don't know if I have a Tendermint network actually running right now. CAC. So Tendermint network. I have the archiving. Maybe that's useful. So I went into a folder called CAC, which is configuration as code. It's one of the ways we manage our EC2 instances in Interchain. So obviously, you know the Ansible CFG. I actually copied it from here, so it's exactly the same as it was. Oops, when I showed it. So only it's using EC2 PI because obviously I have multiple servers here. And I have different playbooks for different parts of different nodes. So for example, the archive1 node has to have the Gaia-D. Oh, okay, so I didn't go into roles yet. I need to go into roles before we get here. So yeah, Bucky, I can get back to you on that. Is that okay? Because I want to show the roles first.
Sure.
Okay. So going back to our original folder. So you can see that now it's getting a bit complex. We have a few files used for different when you start adding files that you want to copy over. It would be nice if I could just put them in some folders, and this is exactly what we're going to do. So What Ansible defines is as a role is a set of tasks that you run on a set of files with a set of variables and with some other additional things. So what we're going to move these steps into these roles, which you can reuse afterwards for different things. For example, our first book seems like a good way to install a new service on the machine. So if I put this in a role, then I can just call install this, and then all the steps in that role will run as they're supposed to. Yeah, okay, sorry, I ran forward too much because I want to show you notify before that. Yeah, okay, so before we get there though, one last step I'm going to show you before we get to roles is, you can see the start service here, right? After installing the package, it will try to start the service. But if you think about it, there might be cases where I don't want this to start, or there might be cases where I want it to force to be restart. For example, there's a state called latest. When you're using latest instead of installed, it's going to check yum update and see if there's a newer version of the package that you're trying to install. And if there is, it's going to try to install that newer version. When you used installed, and if there's a version already installed, it's not going to touch it. So as I said, idempotent. This one is idempotent. Latest will always try to install the latest and only say that nothing changed if what you have is already the latest. So let's say I use the latest. So I don't actually know if anything changed here, but I would really like to restart the service if it changed. If it didn't, I don't want to restart the service. So what can I do then? So there is an extra option you can use with any of the tasks, which is called notify. Notify will only run it will run a different task and only run if the task you were running has changed. So in this case, I want to write a task that calls a restart for Nginx. And notify is using special tasks called handlers. So I need to define these handlers here. It's going to be very similar. I have a name, which is, again, restart Nginx. And I have a task, which is service, with the name, oh, sorry, not, yeah, restart service, Nginx. I wrote Nginx now. Restart service name equals Nginx. State equals restarted. So now what I can do is I can remove this. I'm going to keep this around. So if I install the newer version, then I can run this extra command to restart it. The only thing you have to be aware of that this handler is only going to run at the end of the playbook. So it will run all these steps, and at the end, it will restart Nginx. It's not because I put it at the bottom of the file. It's because it's always going to be the last action that it does. And I wanted to show you this because handlers can also be moved into a role. So I wanted to make sure that you have this knowledge before I go to roles. Does this make sense?
Yeah. So the idea with the handler is that it only runs. It's like conditionally. So if this other task went as expected, or if it caused an update, then it'll run this restart. Then it'll run the handler.
It will run the handler, exactly. Okay. For example, you change the config file with the template package, template module for your Tendermint node, and then you can say you can add a notify restart Tendermint handler to restart Tendermint because the config changed, right? So you don't have to write it out as an extra task because then it will always restart it because that's what you ask it to do. You only want to restart it if the config changed. So let's write a Tendermint config management tool for the tech servers. The reason I'm writing it here and now is more, it has more to do with, I don't actually have something to show you except for the archive nodes. And archive nodes are just one-off nodes. I think this is going to be better if we go through it step by step because you will understand all the details. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, so now that we have all this knowledge, I'm going to start putting everything into roles. So roles start with the roles folder. And under the roles folder, you can have any number of roles. So we're going to make a role that will just install Tendermint. Let's call it install. In the install, you see I'm just creating folders now. In the install role, I will have obviously tasks. And I just showed you the handlers, so let's do the handlers too. And I might have files. So this is a folder structure I'm creating, which is very similar all over the place for Ansible. So you have a roles folder, and then under it the name for that role, and then under it you can have tasks, handlers, files. Just to make it complete, you can have defaults, which is the default variables you can set up separately, and then you can override them as you see fit. And you can have templates, which is for the template, what's it called? Template module. So if I go into tasks, each of these folders will have a main YAML file. This is always called main YAML. You can have multiple YAML files in here and you can call them, but that's more advanced. We usually don't need this. So I'm just going to have a main YAML. So now I can start writing my tasks for this role. So what we're going to do is install Tendermint. So most probably we have somewhere down to download Tendermint from. There is a get URL module you can use to download using HTTP or HTTPS. I think it also supports FTP. Get URL, download files from HTTP, HTTPS, or FTP to node. The important part will be the URL itself. So that's what we need to define. And if you have the SHA summary, you can also edit here, and it will fail if the SHA summary doesn't match what you downloaded. And you need a destination where you want it to be. So let's take Tendermint's release. Where's the releases page? And let's take the latest version for Linux. So URL is here. Obviously, you will set some kind of checksum, but I don't know the checksum right now, and I'm not going to look it up. And we need a destination. Let's put it under temp/tendermint.zip. And then as a next step, we need to install the file. So unpack Tendermint. You can see that I'm writing tasks here without the task, what's it called, the name itself. And I don't have hosts here because roles will be applied to whatever host the playbook defines. So I'm just literally making a skeleton of the tasks, and then we'll apply those later. So unpacking is, you can use the onArchive module for that, which will have, I think, a source and a destination. But just so you get familiar with the documentation, let's do it through the documentation onArchive. So it can, yeah, it has a source, which is the zip file, and it has a destination, which is, again, where you want to put it. And fortunately, it has the group, owner, and mode strings. So I'm going to set this up in one step. So I'm going to do source equals temp/tendermint zip. Destination equals /user bin tendermint. Mode is executable. Well, owner and group doesn't need to be set because I'm running this as root. So it's going to be root. So I set up the binary. Perfect. Now I should have something that copies over the Tendermint service file. But as we already saw that in tech, they are all copied over. So I'm not going to write this. That's the homework. Do it for yourself. Usually when you change a service file, you need to have a notify at the end that says, actually, let's write this. Source equals tendermint.service, destination equals etc systemd system tendermint.service. And I need to reload the systemd daemon. So I need to write a notify rule for that. So if you change a service in systemd, you need to run the command systemctl daemon reload. Sorry. But obviously one of the Ansible modules will take care of that for us. What's the question?
Just there's a typo. You wrote TRE under source, copy source.
Thank you. Yeah, that would have looked bad. So what do we need to do? The first two are self-explaining. This one needs a little bit of setup. I need to have this file in place, and I need to have this handler written. So let's do that. As I mentioned, so I'm in the task folder under roles in the install task. So as I mentioned, files go into the files folder. So I need to copy whatever we had. Tendermint service here. So I put it in the files folder, and you can see that under the task, copy Tendermint service, I didn't actually say where it's at. So this is why the roles folder structure is important, because Ansible knows about it. So now Ansible is always going to look for any files for this specific role under the files folder, and any templates for the template module for this specific role under the templates folder. Makes sense, right? And handlers are the same. So I have the handlers folder, and I want to write a main YAML for that. What was it? Restart daemon. That was it, right? So I'm cheating here a little bit. Systemd is quite a new module, and usually you do all service-related tasks with the service command, because the service command is compatible with all kinds of Linuxes. Systemd is only compatible with the Linuxes that use systemd. So CentOS, Amazon are compatible. Ubuntu is compatible. So we're good. And then there is a daemon reload equals yes, I think. But again, if you're not sure, you go to the documentation and read it. The systemd module manages services. Daemon underscore reload daemon underscore, yeah, equals yes. So I wrote the handler for that. So if I run this, let's see if we can run this. How do I run this? I have a second book. Yeah, I didn't use this. We don't need this. So for all the text servers, remember what I did before. I added tasks and then started adding my tasks, right? Now instead of that, I'm going to say, oh, by the way, I have a role, which is called install. Just do everything that's in there. It's a good cleanup, right? So this is how it looked before, and this is how it looks now. I'm going to add the gather facts part because we don't actually use anything there. To make it a little quicker, and let's see what happens. Ansible Playbook, second book YAML. Now we will find all the typos we missed while I was typing all this. So it's able to download, but it wasn't able to unpack it because could not find temp tendermint.zip. If you are using a module and expect the file to exist on remote, see the, oh yes. So all the files that we used so far were on my local machine, and I wanted to copy it over to the remote machine. And that's what is actually install tasks. That's what's happening here. So if I have this locally, then it's going to work. It was expecting it locally. That's normally all the modules will expect everything to be local on your machine and for the destination to be on the remote machines. But I can, so fortunately the unarchived function has something called remote source. So now find the zip file on the remote file system and do it there. Remote source is not available for all the modules, but in this case, it makes so much sense that, oh wow, that they implemented it. Source or content and destination. Okay, maybe, sorry. It's better if we read it. This can be, oh no, I remembered remote source, but most probably it's not that. So it says that source, if remote source equals no, then local path. If yes, then path on the server. So, okay, so I was a bit off. Sorry about that. This is what we need to use. So the source is still necessary, but I have to tell it that it's remote. Yeah. As I said, we're dealing with all the typos I made. Now it's not, oh, user bin Tendermint needs to be an existing, oh, I know why that's doing. So Tendermint zip is a zip file. It can contain multiple things. It doesn't, but it could. So because of that, the destination needs to be a folder, I'm guessing. Unpack Tendermint. Still failed. Okay. So this is what you're going to go through as you start learning the modules, which is fine. As you can see, I also go through this, although I've been doing this for a few years now. Unzip not found. Ha ha. That kind of sucks. So let's make sure that we have unzip. Main equals unzip, state equals install. Usually you don't run into issues that a module requires an external dependency. On archive is special in the case that it actually does. So now we have unzip install. Now it's downloading again. Well, it's already there, so that's good. And now it's trying to unpack. I wonder if we'll run into yet another error message. Nope, was able to do it. And obviously the Tendermint service was already there, so we didn't need to do anything about it. So now we introduced roles, and we actually copied our Tendermint files. So let's move on to configuring our Tendermint service. Let's make that into a different role just so we keep things separated. How you make the roles and what kind of tasks it do is really up to you. You can make very complex roles or very simple roles. I try to make my roles into specific themes. So the first role was installing. The second one is going to be configuring. But if you look at the roles I have for, there's a project we're working on for research papers. Go source, where it's at? GitHub, Interchain IO, images, liking, roles. So for that research paper, I have things like custom, which I really couldn't put anywhere else. I have a role that's called debug, which I only apply if I want to debug things. It's going to enable a lot of debug messages. I have some things that I needed to change in journalD, so I put that into a role. Monitoring is quite a complex one because monitoring installs Telegraph, InfluxDB, Grafana, and it also sets them up. I didn't want to separate it into two because I have all kinds of other things to do. I have a Tendermint role which sets up and configures Tendermint, so I didn't separate it in this case because, again, there are other things to do. Same with Terraform. So you can see that how you define a role and how complex it gets is really up to you. Try to find something that works for you. So in the current case, we're just going to do install, make their tasks, oops, and then create, oh, it's already done. Oh, not install, sorry, config. So config, and make their tasks. So how do we configure Tendermint? So we need a init, run Tendermint init, right? I like to run Tendermint init even if I have all the configurations locally because it sets up the pre-validator key and all kinds of things so much better than if you do everything manually. Now, we need to cheat here. There's no Tendermint module. So the cheat is that there is a module called command. And I deliberately didn't tell you about this command because with this command, you can run any bash command. If you abuse this command, why don't you just write a bash script? Why worry about using Ansible, right? So if you want to run, so in some cases you need it, but try to avoid it if there's a module, because the modules are idempotent, commands are not. For example, if I do something like echo sysv init equals 1 etc /proc well, whatever sysinit slash some file. I really don't know what the exact thing is. So if I do something like this in my Ansible and I run it twice, what's going to happen? Oh, actually, I want to do it like this so I don't want to overwrite anything. So if I do it like this, then it's going to add those lines as many times as I run Ansible, which is not good. That the whole point of Ansible is to try to be idempotent. So if I rerun it, it's going to still be the same thing. So that's why I like to tell people not to use the command module. If you want to do something like this, there's a module called line in file, where you add the file. And then you can have a regex on, you know, if you want to change a line, you can have a regex. Or if you just want to add the line, you can just do something like this. Look up the documentation, or in an advanced, you know, presentation, we can look into this more. But in my case, I need to use the command module because there's no such thing as Tendermint module. So here's the fun part. So we didn't really create a Tendermint user, but it's already there on the machines. So in the install section, we should add a user add Tendermint. And I want to run this Tendermint init command as the Tendermint user, not as root, right? So I can say become, which is sudo, no, do not elevate to that user. But what happens then? So I log in as the CentOS user, and I say don't elevate. So this is going to run as the CentOS user. Nope, that's not really good. So become still should stay. You can explicitly say yes, but we already stated that in our Ansible config file, so we don't need to. But we can say the user that I become to shouldn't be root, it should be Tendermint. And then it's going to sudo to Tendermint and run the Tendermint init command. This part of Ansible is not very stable, I would say. Most of the cases it works, but there are some interesting sudo issues with Ansible, and I have to look up the exact edge case. There is an edge case where this is going to cause you issues. The issues that it causes is that somehow it keeps the files that you create as owned by root instead of the user Tendermint. It sucks. It would be nice to have a Tendermint module, actually, which can do a init for us and an unsafe reset, for example. So if you want to be sure, if you want to go for sure, then you make sure all files are owned by Tendermint. Then you can do something like this. And then the file module, as I said, can change the file stuff. So file module path equals home tendermint slash dot tendermint, owner equals tendermint, root equals tendermint. And I think it needs to be recursive. So let's look up what the exact command for recursive is.
So, Greg, I don't mean to interrupt, but
go ahead. Look, we've done this for an hour and a half.
Yeah. So I think we need to wrap up so we can chat about a few other things. But at least for me, hopefully for others, this has been super helpful to orient around the tool. And maybe we'll follow up with another one to go specifically at the Tendermint stuff and with some of the other, you know, some config files you've already written and how we can start using those playbooks instead of, you know, having to write our own from scratch and all that. So
right. I think what we need to do is we need to so yes, start playing around with it, see what you can get out of it, and then we need to make some decisions that we're going to apply on all our playbooks, and then we can start using our playbooks. You see that I decided that the Tendermint service file is going to be under etc systemd system. You can actually put it in 3 different places on Linux and it will still work. So if we decide that we're always putting it in the same place, then we have an easier time. I decided I have a Tendermint user. If we decide we're always going to have a Tendermint user on the server for running Tendermint, then we can reuse other scripts. So this is a longer path we have to walk. Let's start with, guys, let's play around with Ansible, and then we reconvene at a different time. Sorry for taking up so much of your time, and I really hope
I think this is really helpful. Maybe before we wrap up, does anyone have any like final questions or thoughts or anything?
No, thank you.
Cool. All right, thanks a lot, Greg. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Okay. Stop sharing.